Welcome to the WanderLearn show. I'm your host, Francis Tapon. But today, I'm not your host, actually. The host will be Hrish Lotlikar. He is involved with the Superworld app, which is a cool new app that allows you to voyage virtually all over the world. It's pretty neat. You should check it out. The link is in the description. In it, he's interviewing me. You can see a link also for the YouTube video if you want to see it on YouTube. I cleaned up a little bit of the audio and I'm sharing it with you because you might be interested in it. In the podcast, I talk about the misconceptions that people have about going to dangerous countries and why they're a lot safer than you think, how I picked up 3,000 hitchhikers across Africa and what it taught me about humanity, why leaving behind a traditional career was the best decision of my life, my top strategies for traveling on a budget without sacrificing too much, and a little bit about my upcoming book. All right. Here we go. Enjoy. And don't forget to become a patron at patreon.com/ftapon.
I'm really excited today to introduce my guest, Francis Tapon, host of the WanderLearn show, and really explore his life, his travels, and what inspires him. So thanks so much for joining us on the Building a Better World podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
I've seen a lot of your content and love all of the adventures that you've talked about and shown us in the content that you produce. And I'm so excited to have you on to learn more about your inspiration. Maybe as a starter, would love to learn kind of more about your background. How did you, get started, and what kind of prompted you to, build what you're building?
Well, I got started in the womb, I think, because my mom is from Chile, my father's French, and I was born in San Francisco. So right off the bat, I got like 3 passports kind of perfectly made for traveling the world. And, half my family was in Europe, the other half was in South America. And then, I was being raised in North America. And so the people talk about 3 culture kids. Well, I was like a 4 culture kid. And so I think that was the inspiration.
Wow. And did you travel a lot at an early age? I mean, when did you start really kind of, going international?
I traveled before I even realized I was traveling. In other words, I see pictures of me as a baby, as an infant, as a toddler in France, next to the Tour Eiffel or Notre Dame. And I see myself in Chile. I don't even have memories of that, but I see, well, I was there. So from an early age, yes. And back then, it was a lot more expensive to do. I was just talking to my mom today, and this is here you and I are talking through Zoom for free. And back then, my mom said that when she needed to call long distance, like to the United States from Chile, she would have to call in and they would say, "We will schedule your call to try back again tomorrow."
Wow.
Because they didn't have like the capacity. They didn't have, and I remember we would actually record long distance calls, like international calls. We would record them so we could play them over and over again. They were so expensive. It's like the equivalent of today, like, I don't know, like $10 a minute or whatever it is. It's just really, really expensive. Maybe $5 a minute. It was just a very expensive to make an international call. And here you and I are talking, not just talking, we're seeing each other. It's video.
Yeah.
It's crazy for free.
I know, it's crazy just how how technology is really improving the connection of being able to communicate and to be able to visualize and get to know the world. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in the US, did you say?
Yeah, San Francisco, California.
Yeah. And what got you into travel then? Did you start in a traditional kind of career and move into travel, or was it something that kind of sparked that change, or the inception of it?
Well, I always had a bit of a wanderlust. Even as a child, I would go explore creeks and things like that. And, just general interest and curiosity that would lead my nose to go to places. But I would say that the first time when I really traveled was right after college. I took a proverbial trip through Europe. It took 75 days. My buddy and I went to about most of Western Europe, and including parts of Central Europe. And this was anyway, when we were 22 years old. So it was a seminal trip. And I think that's when I really loved travel. And I think the other inflection point was when I was 30. That's when I hiked the Appalachian Trail. And that's when I had 4 months of hiking about 3,000 kilometers or about 2,000 miles. And I was able to really contemplate, like, what do I want to do with my life? And I thought to myself, well, I would love to travel all the time. And I don't need $1 billion to do that. Why can't I just do that now? So how about I restructure my life so that I can travel as much as I can and maybe forego a lot of income as a result, but at least accumulate a lot of experiences.
And how did you do that? What was the progenitor of doing that, and how did you make that a possibility in your life? Because a lot of people want to travel and they're very inspired by your stories. And I'd love to go into kind of all the places you have traveled and hear those stories. But just as a starter, how did you think through that big dramatic kind of thing? Because a lot of people don't go after the things that they want.
Yeah, and I had something that both enabled me and disabled me from doing that. I went to Harvard Business School to get an, MBA.
Hmm.
And anybody who has an MBA from Harvard is really encouraged to make $1 billion and to start big companies and, launch a startup or work for IBM or Google or whatever and rise the corporate ladder and become CEO and, get all the accolades. So in that sense, it disabled me in the sense that it kind of crushes any kind of fanciful dream of traveling the world, right? Because it's kind of like you're wasting your degree. I mean, like going to Harvard Medical School, for example, and you don't become a doctor. Are you a stupid idiot? What's wrong with you? And you're going to go to Harvard Business School and you're not going to become a businessman, a titan of industry? What's wrong with you? So it really takes a lot of, I guess, courage and maybe stupidity to just embark on such a quest and say no to that. On the other hand, it definitely enabled me. Very privileged to having had that degree, because then what it does, it allows me to take bold risks, knowing that if all else fails, I've got this wonderful diploma that will allow me to earn money in the future in case I ever, find myself living on the street. So that gave me courage to take risks that maybe normal people wouldn't be able to take comfortably. And of course, I didn't have a family or children, that kind of stuff that additionally would also create some sort of burden and have some sort of sense of responsibility. So that one thing I think helped me and hurt me. So taking it back to your listeners, I would say that you may not be blessed with that such a degree, but at the same time, you may not be cursed with it either. So, count your blessings and realize that it doesn't take a whole lot of money, and you're blessed to live in the 21st century where earning money is relatively easy. The unemployment rate is far less than 5%. And, hey, you can do great things and you can always find a job. Even we're in a society now where the poorest people are fat. That's never happened in human history. It's always the rich people who are fat back in the old days. But now that it's the poor people who are fat. So it's a land of abundance. So let's not forget that.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That I think that there's resources all around us that are available, and it's really about kind of believing and understanding how to utilize those resources for what you want to do. But there's a lot of opportunity available, more and more opportunity. So it's really interesting. So you kind of, as you said, start off on a traditional kind of business path. Went to business school, started off in technology, as I know. Would love to hear about, what kind of drew those interests as well, as they kind of pulled you in that direction before you kind of, were able to fully kind of thrust out into the travel experiences as well.
Okay, I'll answer that, but I want to just add one small caveat to what I just said before, which is my message is mainly directed to people from high income countries. So Europe, Australia, America, North America, that kind of stuff. I recognize I've traveled all over Africa, for example, and I know that people there don't have the same level of privilege and access. Poorest people there are definitely not fat, and they are truly struggling in many cases. And so when I say that you're living in a place where low unemployment rate, I'm not talking about South Africa, where the youth unemployment rate is over 60%. As there's other things like that. So that's number one. Regarding to answer your second question, which is about how I got into I guess, technology in Silicon Valley. Was born and raised in Silicon Valley, and so I had a natural affinity to technology, I guess. And I always had a passion for robotics, and so I created a robotic company that was looking. It was a machine vision company, so it was like machine eyes, if you will, and it was self-learning algorithm. This was back in 1990, late 1990s. So it was doing basically artificial intelligence where we would present it a bunch of objects and it would learn things just by looking at them. So just kind of like we were training a neural net. We were doing that in the late 1990s, obviously a bit ahead of our time, and the startup didn't go as well as we wanted to, but that's kind of my origin story there.
Got it. Got it. Yeah, it's good to understand that caveat as well. I think there is a bit of inequality in terms of opportunities around the world, and
For sure.
and you've seen it, and you've been on the ground in so many places. Where did you start? Where did you start your journeys in the world, and how did that progress? I know you mentioned you traveled as a study abroad, or kind of that trip, the proverbial kind of trip after college, I guess. But talk to me about like where did you start your journeys geographically around the world?
So, as I mentioned before, as an early child, I went to France and Chile not many times. France a couple of times, and Chile probably like 10 times as a young child. And then I worked in Hitachi Data Systems in Silicon Valley, and they sent me to Latin America a lot to do some marketing stuff for them in Latin America. So that was other trips. Then when I did my trip through Europe around 22, and then I decided I was going to become a travel writer. And so I decided, instead of just jumping all over haphazardly around the world in a chaotic fashion, I would instead be more systematic, and I would pick a region and really dig deep into that region. So, for example, I went to Eastern Europe and spent 3.5 years in Eastern Europe, never leaving the region, and just going around 25 different countries in Eastern Europe, broadly defined. And that's what was the genesis of my book, The Hidden Europe, What Eastern Europeans Can Teach Us. And so that was one big trip. And then the second, another big trip, actually, back up a little bit. I also hiked the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. I did this yo-yos, and that was a genesis of my first book, the Hike Your Own Hike. And finally, the third book, which is I'm working on, which is going to Africa, and I went to all 54 African countries over 5 years, and then I spent another 3 years after that to have some more experiences. But that was started in Morocco, went all the way around, and ended in Morocco again. And it was just an amazing adventure.
I've definitely seen a lot of content around that. I can't wait for the book to come out that you're writing. What do you think is the biggest lessons from those trips that you've been on? What do you think you gather from those adventures?
Yeah. One of the things is something that's common, and you actually hear a lot of well-traveled people. And when I say well-traveled people, I've definitely been over 50 countries or 100 countries. You realize there's a common theme that people in the world are good, and the world is a lot safer than it seems. We read the headlines, and it seems a very scary world out there. But once you actually go out there, especially even going out to places that seem scary, like Africa, it seems scary, but I've been to Sudan, South Sudan, and Somalia, and Chad, and Libya. I mean, and all these places sound horrible, but in fact, it's not that bad, and sometimes surprisingly safe. And that's just like the quote unquote war zones. And let alone, we're talking about places like Benin, or places like maybe parts of Nigeria, that are really not that bad. They're totally safe. And so, anyway, it's that, I think that's one of the big takeaways, is that the world is not that scary of a place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's important to be social, right? To
Yes.
get to know people, to invite people. I remember hearing your talk about your trip to Africa, and it'd take people inside. You'd actually pick people up and take them on the voyage with you, and you'd have lots of people in the car, in your SUV. And that created this environment where it actually even made you safer in a way.
Yeah, it's the paradox. I pick up 3,000 hitchhikers in Africa, and my thesis is that most people are good. And so if you have lots of people in your car, that means you have lots of good. And if 1 in 5 is a bad, criminal or has some sort of ill intent, well, he's not going to do anything because he's surrounded by 4 other people who are, good local people who are going to not allow him to get away with any criminal activity. So, and that pretty much worked well. I really didn't have any major incidents the entire trip for after 3,000 hitchhikers, and most people would not have predicted that.
Yeah, yeah. I've done a lot of travel as well. Been over 100 countries and live very nomadically as a family. So it's me and my wife and 2 kids. So we love the world. We love exploring the world. I think my 8-year-old's already lived in 29 countries already. So definitely we have an 8 and 5-year-old. So we definitely love seeing cultures and places. So really kind of resonate with a lot of the things that you say and the lessons that you've learned. Would love to hear some stories about, we spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, and I want to hear about Africa as well. But in Eastern Europe, tell me about that was kind of some of the earlier places that you spent time. Would love to hear about love that, kind of what kind of experiences did you have there? Historically, what was going on when you were there? That part of the world has had a lot of change politically and geopolitically. I think it's in the news now, obviously. And so, can you tell us more about what you experienced there, what you learned from being in that region, maybe some things that could relate to what's happening there now?
Yeah, I'm actually recording this conversation from Eastern Europe. I'm right now in Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia, and this is my 5th time back in Estonia, and it's amazing the progress. I first came to Estonia in 2024. Uh, sorry, 2004, and 2004. This is 20 years ago, and it has transformed so much. And you could say that about a lot about Eastern Europe. And the other thing about Eastern Europe that you'll say is that almost nobody in Eastern Europe wants to admit that they are in Eastern Europe. That's the paradox. Everybody wants to believe that Eastern Europe is whatever country is just east of them. That's where Eastern Europe starts. So there's a stigma to being in Eastern Europe because Eastern Europe is kind of seen as the kind of the backward ex-communist countries. And of course, they don't feel that way. And then, of course, they're not that way anymore, especially if you go to places more like in Central Europe, but which was originally called Eastern Europe, which is Czechia and Hungary and even the Balkans has improved immeasurably. A lot of people still associate this when you hear things like Kosovo and Bosnia. They're like, "Oh my God!" Like Bosnia, the war ended like so long ago, 25 years ago or more. So it's like get over it. And that's one thing. Another thing about history, really, we have these really slow-changing memories. If I tell you, even the word Vietnam, people are like Vietnam. Oh, I'm going to Vietnam in a few days. And there's probably still some people who would like associate Vietnam with some sort of danger. And so we're very slow at getting rid of this baggage of war, and that kills tourism. But for those who are listening to this, think of that as a great ticket to go to unexplored places. So anywhere where you hear something that sounds scary, if the war ended there like 5 years ago or less, it's probably totally chill now, totally chill. And probably nobody's going there. So it's something to consider.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I noticed that as well. Is that a lot of people have these preconceived notions of places based on things that happened long ago that they still think persist. So it's interesting to.
So I can predict today that Ukraine is going to have a maligned perspective on the tourism map for at least 10, 20 years. So, it's not going to be until the year 2050 when finally, assuming the war ends relatively in the next couple of years, it's not going to be until 2050 where finally Ukraine is going to be like what it was like 5 years ago, relatively normal place. Nobody would be afraid of going to Ukraine, just like you're not afraid of going to Bulgaria. What's the problem with Bulgaria? Nothing. Or Romania, what the hell? But Ukraine is going to suffer just like Serbia suffered from tourism. And now finally people are warming up to places like Croatia and Montenegro, which are my favorite gems in Eastern Europe. The coastline there is spectacular, especially in my favorite place of all, which is Kotor, Montenegro. Have you been there?
I've been to Budva. Uh,
Okay, yeah. You didn't have a chance to go to Kotor?
I can't remember if we.
Oh, well, then you didn't go if you can't remember.
Yeah.
It's unforgettable. It's unforgettable.
Okay. Yeah. Then I probably didn't. I went to another place besides Budva when we were there.
Dubrovnik,
And
maybe?
uh, yeah, I'd been to Split, in Croatia, and I haven't been to Dubrovnik. I've been to another city. I just have to look. Mm.
So you're really unusual. They're super unusual because most people, they'll go to Dubrovnik and not see Budva and not see Kotor. I mean, Dubrovnik is the end of the line. They go down the Croatian coastline and then they end at Dubrovnik and then they go back to Zagreb and leave. And they don't push it a little bit further and explore into Montenegro, which is a gem.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We were living in Ukraine at the time, and my wife, I don't know, picked Budva for some reason, and we went in for a few days, and I think like 4 or 5 days, and checked it out, and I think we went on a road trip around there, and went into the water and did some things, some exploration. So
It's possible you went to Kotor or at least drove
yeah,
around it. If you saw a big bay with big fjords, then you probably saw it because if you went on a road trip from Budva, there's really not that many places to go for Budva unless you went to Albania. So it's got to be, you probably saw Kotor. You maybe forgot it, the name.
exactly.
Spectacular.
Yeah, yeah. What your description sounds, it brings back memories. So yeah, yeah. Tell me about any close calls or any anything where you obviously have to do a lot of planning for a lot of the places that you go, and I'm sure sometimes things don't work out or you're in a situation that's a little bit hairy. Yeah, how do you deal with that? And just tell us some stories about some of those adventures.
Yeah, I luckily have the luxury of time, and this is what most people get screwed with when it comes to travel. When all of a sudden, most people they plan a very tight schedule. They're going to go to Japan, and they've got 10 days, and so every single day has to kind of work, which of course works in Japan, a very organized society. But planning 10 days down to the wire, if you're going to Sierra Leone, may not be the wisest thing. You need to have buffer time because things, all of a sudden the road, the vehicle you're taking breaks down and all of a sudden you lose a whole day and then, you know, some paperwork that you expected to be done never gets done. It's just chaos. And so it comes down to where you're going to. And so I've had plenty of things go wrong. There's an expression called TIA, which is this is Africa. Another one's called Wawa, which is West Africa wins again, because it's so often that things go wrong in many parts of Africa, just because it's not an organized society like Switzerland, just not. And as a result, you can't depend that maybe electricity will be there, maybe there won't be there, and maybe the running water won't work, or maybe the road will be shut down, and maybe the air line is on strike. Who knows? And so, if you have the luxury of time, like I do, then it's not the end of the world. You just wait another day. But in other cases, it can really cause havoc. Yeah, so that's why people tend to prefer places like Italy because things are going to work and you can plan the schedule and it's all going to work.
Yeah. Do you when you go off the grid or in explore places that most people don't go, what kind of preparation do you do? I know you have a really awesome kind of record of all the travels on GPS you showed me. What kind of stuff do you do? What kind of equipment do you carry with you? What's your travel bag look like?
Yeah, it depends whether I'm going with a car or not. And when I'm not going with a car, and it depends also, like for example, in Eastern Europe, I had a tarp and a sleeping bag and a pad with me.
Mhm.
So with those three items, you can camp anywhere. And it's incredible. When I say anywhere, I've even camped in Rome, which was kind of a feat to pull off. I found a little park that was secluded and I was able to camp in Rome. So if I could do it there, I was like, I could do it anywhere. I camped in Dubrovnik, in the actual city of Dubrovnik, the walled city, which is unusual too. I found a place. So you can camp all sorts of places. So I've camped a lot in my life, and so I'm quite comfortable camping. Most people are not. And so the nice thing when you have a stealthy campsite is that you don't have the pressure of having to find a hostel. Like, oh my God, the hostel's full. No big deal. You just go to the outskirts of the city and you can camp. Um, and there's always a way. So that's in kind of the super lightweight backpacking, sleeping outside mode. If you have a car, then it's a totally different dimension because there I mean, you can still camp actually. And I did that when I had my car in Africa. I had what's it called, the Toyota Hilux, which is like a pickup truck. And I had all my camping gear with me, but then you can really go on the outskirts. In fact, you have to because the car sits out like a sore thumb. You're not going to do that in an urban area. You're not going to camp there. So, but Africa is not that dense. It's got the same density as the United States. And so as a result, there's plenty of empty space in Africa and you can just pull aside at sunset and camp. And that's why we did, hundreds of times. So it depends on the travel mode, but I like having the option of being able to sleep outside. And that way I don't ever have to make a hotel reservation. I think I only made like 5 hotel reservations in 5 years in Africa. It's just exceedingly rare that I would have to make a hotel reservation. But that's the way I like to travel. I like to not plan tremendously because I love to have a lot of space open for serendipity. I love to being on the train, and also I meet somebody on the train and they say, oh, no, we got my friends and I are going to go on this trip. Why don't you come join us? Great. Go there. If I had a hotel reservation or I had a whole itinerary planned out, I would be, sorry, I got to go. So I got to go the other way. I can't go. I can't join you. And I'm going to miss out a great cultural opportunity, which is to me the greatest joy of travel.
Yeah. Do you travel with groups or individually, or you said you're kind of serendipitous about some of these travel plans. Is it always something then therefore that you have to travel on your own, or sometimes is it that you have to stay in hotels because you're with people that want to stay in hotels, or you generally with people who like to travel in the same type of mode? What do you think about that? Because I love how you travel, but I assume that sometimes, you meet a group and they're like, hey, let's, go to this place, or let's travel like this versus that way.
Right. Just because you have, I mean, again, a tarp and a sleeping bag and a pad really doesn't take up that much space. It only weighs about, let's say, 1 kilogram, something like that. It's not that much. And so you can throw those in, and then that doesn't mean you have to camp. It just means that you've got this nice backup. So yes, I do. I rarely travel in groups. It's extremely rare. Um, I will, let's say I have a friend who might say, hey, I want to go travel with you for like a week or two or something like that. And I'm like, okay, sure, join me. And then, or I might just follow along with whatever their itinerary is.
Yeah.
So that kind of, that's fine. And then we might share a hotel room together or not. And so to me, most people, I haven't met too many travelers like me who don't mind doing urban camping or that kind of stuff. Um, that's okay. And of course, doing urban camping is easier in nice weather. I did camp in an urban setting in Latvia in the winter in February while it was snowing, but that was unusual. I was super tired. And anyway, I decided to try it and it worked. But bottom line is, hotels also are very cheap in certain parts of the world. And for a lot of people, spending $20 is like, okay, no problem. I can get a nice place. And I also like hostels. Hostels can be quite nice because again, it's a social environment and you get to meet other travelers.
Yeah.
But one quick thing about hostels, I stayed in a hostel in Helsinki just about a month ago, and I was very surprised and kind of disappointed, but not actually, I shouldn't say surprised. It's very different than hostels from decades ago because everybody was on their devices. And so a lot of people had their headset on and versus, pre-smartphones, people were all interacting with each other and just meeting each other. It was a very social environment. And nowadays, everybody's kind of buried on their screens, which is a shame.
Yeah, what do you think about that? I mean, you're in Silicon Valley, and some of the things that we're focused on at Superworld is about what we're building is all about going out there and doing things in the real world. So, we're focused on people's real lives. What do you think about the fact that I think people are getting more stuck into their devices and maybe not going out, what do you say to society? How should we kind of promote travel and exploring and going out into the wild?
Well, I'm an optimist in general, so I kind of default to that. And I think it's not as doom and gloomy as some people think. For instance, a few stats.
Mhm.
Air travel used to be expensive, especially in Europe. It got cheap in America first, and then it became cheap in Europe too. So now all of a sudden you can fly for less than 50 euros or 10 euros or 20 euros, whatever. It's crazy. Um, and and even longer flights are only a couple $100s. So airline prices have dropped dramatically in the last few decades. So that's accessible. I think also because we're international, we can have a lot. I have a lot of Facebook friends that are international, and so all of a sudden you can create these relationships digitally online. You can go to, let's say, Superworld and get inspired digitally by some place like, oh my God, I never knew this gorge existed in this part of China. Maybe I should go check out that gorge in real life. And so I think the digital world can work well to inspire people, either through digital friendships that they start there, and then you actually meet. There's countless people who've met online and get married, for God's sakes. And so to me, I don't see it as a thing that's necessarily all negative. Obviously, there's some negative that the whole digital world, but I can see it as being an inspiration, as a way to maintain bonds. That's the other thing, is that back in the past, when I met some girl, I was 12 years old. I met her in Switzerland. We had to write handwritten letters and mail them. It would take like a month to get there. Nowadays, after I meet somebody in Switzerland, I could like get on WhatsApp and do video calls for the rest of my life with them. So it's a way to maintain those connections, and all of a sudden it makes travel a lot easier.
I agree that the technology can be used for positivity and good. So I'm also optimist on that. I know you have a book coming out, so I'd love to, tell us more about your book coming out, and also just places that people can find you and hear more about you and hear your story, and if there's anything else you want us to share to our audience.
Sure. The book is called The Unseen Africa, and you can go to theunseenafrica.com. I also have a podcast and a YouTube channel. You go to WanderLearn. So I believe in wandering around the world and learning. So that's why I created that, wanderlearn.com. And the book, I don't know if it's coming out in 2026. Let's just say 2026. We'll just say that as a date. But I have a Patreon where people can get the chapters as I write them. There are going to be 54 chapters. I'm more than halfway done, and you can read back chapters once you become a patron. So that's pretty much what I'm working on right now. And I really appreciate the time that you've had to share this with your audience. And I hope I've inspired some of them to go out there and get off their couch and go.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, your story is so inspiring, and your content that you make and videos and just showcasing all these places in the world is so amazing. So thank you so much for being on and sharing your story, Francis. It's a pleasure, and looking forward to having you on again when your book comes out and when you can share more stories.
Sweet. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And that ends this episode of the WanderLearn podcast, where we explore travel, technology, and transformation. If you'd like to see the show notes with links to what we've talked about, go to wanderlearn.com and click on this episode. If you'd like to connect with me, just remember F Tapon. That's my first initial and my last name. F Tapon is always my social media username. My website is ftapon.com. Do you want to leave me an anonymous voicemail where you can make a comment or ask a question? Then go to speakpipe.com/ftapon. Furthermore, if you'd like to get rewarded for supporting my projects, then go to patreon.com/ftapon. That's where you can pick up some remarkable rewards for as little as $2 a month. Now, 5 quick favors. Number 1, subscribe to the WanderLearn podcast. 2, download it. 3, share it. 4, review it. And 5, sign up for my newsletter at wanderlearn.com. Our theme music was composed by Eric Stratman. This is Francis Tapon, encouraging you to wander and learn.